that Queen Elizabeth II hated Meghan Markle. Late Queen Elizabeth II had worked out the truth about Ms. Markle.
A top-secret message had just left Buckingham Palace, and the moment it reached Meghan, nearly everything she believed she had built began to waver. There was no warning, no prior negotiation. Just a royal lawyer, a closed room, and a dossier sealed under the authority of the late Queen Elizabeth II. Meghan had walked into the meeting thinking it was a routine discussion about the use of the Sussex name in campaigns and fundraising materials. But the man sitting across from her hadn't brought a proposal for minor amendments. He placed a document on the table that could alter the entire future of the Sussex Foundation. The document didn't order the organization to shut down. It did something far more dangerous. It granted the palace the power to challenge any symbol statement campaign or partnership that might lead the public to believe the Sussex Foundation still enjoyed royal patronage. This meant the foundation could survive, but it risked losing the very thing that had opened the biggest doors for it, the power of the royal title. Harry immediately pushed back his chair and demanded to know who had brought this dossier back into play after years of being locked away. The lawyer remained silent. He simply turned slowly to the final page, where a name was handwritten next to the directive to reactivate the review. Meghan looked down. She recognized the name instantly, and the person who had revived Elizabeth's decree was no distant advisor. It was someone who stood very close to the throne. Before this secret door opens, hit subscribe to Royal Palace Corridor so you don't miss the next surprising royal stories. And right now, is it day or night? Where you are, leave your city or country and your local time in the comments below. It is fascinating to know where in the world this story is being followed. But to understand why that name could make Meghan freeze, one must look beyond the file sitting on the table. For behind that directive lay more than just a legal dispute. It involved 4 people looking at the same title, yet seeing 4 vastly different meanings. To Meghan, the Sussex Foundation was never merely a charity. It was proof that her life and influence did not end the moment the palace doors closed behind her. After years of operating within a system where every speech trip and public choice was tightly controlled, the foundation offered her what she craved most: agency. It allowed Meghan to choose the campaigns she wished to pursue, control fundraising efforts, build relationships with international partners, and address the public in her own voice. More importantly, it enabled her to demonstrate that stepping away from her royal role did not mean losing her value. Consequently, Meghan did not view Elizabeth's dossier as a mere administrative regulation. In her eyes, it cast doubt on the entire path she had forged. Every removed symbol, every edited line of text, and every scrutinized campaign made her feel as though the palace was still attempting to dictate who she was permitted to be. Harry, however, viewed the Sussex title through a more painful lens. For him, the foundation was not just Meghan's dream, it was the final bridge connecting his current life to the world he had once belonged to. He could step down from official duties, forgo the ceremonies, and live thousands of miles away from the palace. Yet the Sussex name kept alive the belief that he was not entirely severed from his family. It allowed him to continue advocating for public service without having to return to the constraints of royal oversight. But if that name no longer held symbolic power, Harry would have to face a question he had evaded for years. If the title no longer opened doors, what truly remained of his old life? In London, Charles saw a different kind of tragedy. As a father, he understood why Harry wanted to hold on to that part of his identity. He knew his son had paid a price in estrangement, isolation, and fractured family ties. Yet as King Charles could not ignore the mounting questions from sponsors and international partners. If the Sussex Foundation continued to use a title directly linked to the royal family, would the public assume the king was tacitly backing the organization? And if a campaign sparked controversy, who would be held accountable, a private couple in California or the Crown in London? William viewed the matter more dispassionately, though no less complexly. He did not begrudge Meghan her success, nor did he think Harry and Meghan should abandon their philanthropic work. What William objected to was the potential for public trust in the monarchy to be leveraged for the benefit of an organization the institution no longer controlled, oversaw, or represented. To William, the title was not merely a family asset. It carried national prestige, diplomatic weight, public trust, and the expectation that those who used it would accept the corresponding responsibilities. That was why this crisis could not be resolved with a simple apology, a private phone call, or a media arrangement. In the silent room, Meghan finally turned to Harry. She acknowledged that advisors had warned against using royal imagery in their independent ventures. Yet no one had told her that Elizabeth had prepared a document robust enough to maintain control over those boundaries long after her passing. Harry looked at his wife, then back at the seal on the dossier, and that confession drew them both back to a secret meeting at Windsor, where Queen Elizabeth heard a remark from Meghan, closed the file before her, and made a decision that no one could reverse. It was that very admission that brought memories flooding back to a time months earlier, before any formal split had occurred between Harry, Meghan, and the royal family. Back then, no one imagined that a private audience at Windsor Castle would mark the starting point for the entire chain of events unfolding today. The meeting was arranged within the familiar quiet confines of Windsor Castle. There was no press, no high-ranking officials, and no pomp or ceremony, just a wooden table, a few folders of documents, and Queen Elizabeth II quietly waiting for Meghan to enter. Meghan brought with her a proposal she believed would open a brand new chapter for the charitable work she and Harry undertook. Her plan envisioned a model combining their royal profile, international fundraising networks, global media partners, and social campaigns capable of operating flexibly, even if the couple were no longer serving as working royals. In Meghan's view, this was not a move to break away from the royal family. On the contrary, she believed she was proposing a more modern way to continue their philanthropic efforts. Elizabeth did not interrupt once. She patiently turned the pages of the proposal, listening intently to every idea while revealing almost no emotion. Yet as Meghan concluded her presentation, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. Instead of commenting on the charitable projects or humanitarian goals, the Queen slowly posed a series of very specific questions. If one day Meghan and Harry were no longer working royals who would control the foundation, who would have the authority to approve international partners? Under what circumstances would the Sussex title be used? How would the public distinguish between personal endeavors and activities undertaken on behalf of the Crown? And if a campaign sparked global controversy, who would be held accountable to the public? Meghan sensed the conversation veering away from her expectations. She felt the questions were no longer focused on the merits of the charitable projects, but were instead centering on whether the palace would continue to control her future. After a few moments of silence, Meghan stated her position more clearly than at any other point in the meeting. She insisted that the Sussex Foundation must be permitted to operate with complete independence should she and Harry ever step down from royal duties. Yet the organization needed to retain the Sussex name and the global influence that brand had cultivated. Elizabeth did not object. She gently closed the folder before her, removed her glasses, and gazed at Meghan for a long time without saying a word. That silence exerted more pressure than any argument could have. Finally, the Queen spoke just one sentence. When the duty ends, the name must be protected. Meghan left Windsor believing the meeting had concluded without any agreement being reached. She was unaware that the moment the door closed, Elizabeth immediately summoned her private secretary. No punitive decree was issued. No plan was hatched to shut down any charitable foundations. Elizabeth's only requirement was the creation of a long-lasting legal instrument to safeguard the boundary between the royal identity and any future private entities. That document was to be strictly sealed, to be opened only if the public ever began to blur the lines between the prestige of the crown and the influence of an independent organization. Years later, a steady stream of letters from international donors and partners questioning the nature of palace patronage led William to conclude that the scenario the Queen had foreseen had indeed come to pass. And upon learning that it was William who had initiated the review, Meghan decided that this time she would no longer communicate through lawyers. She wanted to confront the person who had brought that decree back to light. And this time, Meghan did exactly what she had said she would do. When the door opened, William was already standing there beside a sealed file. There were no royal aides, no lawyers, no recording devices, and no intermediaries capable of smoothing over the conversation that was about to unfold. Harry had requested the meeting. He believed that matters concerning family titles and Queen Elizabeth's legacy could not continue to be debated through cold legal correspondence. But the moment Meghan walked in, he realized there was no room in that room for easy reconciliation. Meghan did not sit down. She looked William straight in the eye and declared that the palace was using Elizabeth's memory and authority to dismantle a successful organization. In her view, the Sussex Foundation was not being targeted for any wrongdoing, but rather because it proved that she and Harry could maintain global influence, even after leaving the royal system. Meghan argued that William was not truly protecting the crown. He was protecting a power structure that could not tolerate the idea of those who had left it continuing to succeed without permission. William listened without interrupting. He did not raise his voice, nor did he retaliate with a personal attack. When Meghan finished speaking, William simply glanced down at the file and replied that success had never been the threat. The real issue was the responsibility that came with trust. William explained that the Sussex title did not function like an ordinary brand name. It opened doors that would be virtually inaccessible to a new organization. It reassured donors, gave partners confidence in the foundation's stability, and created a sense of legitimacy that the organization itself had not yet had time to build. In William's view, that power did not belong solely to Harry or Meghan. It was forged through generations of public service, the prestige of the crown, and the trust the people placed in the royal family. William then revealed what had prompted him to call for a legal review. A major international donor had sent a written request for confirmation that the Sussex Foundation was receiving official approval from Buckingham Palace. Shortly thereafter, several other organizations raised similar questions before committing to partnerships. To William, these inquiries were clear evidence that Elizabeth's concerns were no longer merely theoretical. The confusion was beginning to impact actual decision-making. Meghan stepped toward the table, placed her hand on the file, and demanded that William look her in the eye as he defended the invocation of the Queen's decree. William did not look away. He stated that the document belonged to Elizabeth, and that the principles within it were her decision. Yet it was he who had asked the lawyers to revisit the matter. An immediate silence fell over the room. What Meghan had suspected was now confirmed. Finally, Harry was compelled to speak. He did not ask William why he had taken that step. Instead, he asked whether Charles had the authority to halt the entire process. William replied that the king had the right to determine the extent of its implementation. With that single statement, the conflict shifted away from the room where Meghan and William stood. It moved to Charles's desk, to a father who had to decide whether he could defy his own mother's final directive in order to protect the son he still feared losing completely. And from that moment on, all eyes turned to Charles. He had known about the directive for months. The dossier had sat on the king's desk, accompanied by reports warning that the line between the Sussex Foundation and the Crown was becoming increasingly blurred. Yet Charles did not immediately authorize its enforcement. It was not because he underestimated the risk. Rather, he understood all too well the cost of a decisive move, as King Charles had a duty to safeguard the reputation of the Crown. But as a father, he still hoped to avert another rift with Harry. Consequently, he instructed his advisors to continue issuing private warnings, while holding off on any legal action that might escalate a family disagreement into a public crisis. This delay, however, gave rise to two completely opposing interpretations. Meghan and Harry believed Charles might still side with them when the moment of decision arrived. Meanwhile, William and the lawyers began to fear that the king was allowing personal sentiment to undermine the very boundaries Elizabeth had strived to protect. Finally, Harry called his father directly. He did not mince words. He simply asked Charles one question: could he halt the implementation of the directive? Charles acknowledged that he could continue to delay. However, he noted that new reports had altered the situation. An increasing number of donors, media partners, international organizations, and event organizers were demanding confirmation as to whether the Sussex Foundation represented the royal family. Each such inquiry further blurred the distinction between a private entity and the Crown. Harry immediately pushed back. He argued that his father had known the facts all along, yet remained silent while he and Meghan continued to prepare for campaigns that could be scrapped at any moment. In Harry's view, that silence was not an act of protecting the family. It only made the blow land later and hurt more. Charles did not deny it. He said he had tried to avoid another rift. He had hoped that private warnings would suffice to bring about change without the need for a formal decree. But then the king turned to the final page of Elizabeth's document. He read aloud to Harry the clause he had spent months trying to sidestep. No member of the family, not even a future monarch, was permitted to undermine safeguards simply to avoid emotional conflict. The text did not mention Harry by name. It did not mention Meghan. But both men understood that Elizabeth had accurately foreseen this very moment, the moment when a father's love might cause a king's sense of duty to waver. The call ended without a clear goodbye. Charles sat alone in his study. Before him lay his mother's signature. In his mind, his son's voice still echoed. He placed his fingertips on the final line, read the clause once more, and slowly closed the file. Then Charles set down his pen and spoke to the secretary waiting outside. "Proceed." He did not order the closure of the Sussex Foundation, but with those 3 words, the king authorized lawyers to scrutinize every campaign, every partnership, and every message that appeared to rely on royal patronage. The decision was made quietly, but Meghan would be the first to feel its weight. And the consequences of that decision arrived faster than anyone in Meghan's room could have imagined. The first call lasted less than 4 minutes. On the other end of the line, a representative from a major international partner announced that the upcoming joint campaign was being put on hold. It wasn't because they objected to the project's goals, nor was there an issue with funding. The sole reason was that their legal team needed to ensure no public messaging created the impression that the Sussex Foundation enjoyed royal patronage. Meghan sat motionless as the call ended. Just minutes later, another email arrived. An organization demanded a complete rewrite of the partnership language. A sponsor withdrew from the launch event. A media partner delayed the press release. And the campaign Meghan had spent months preparing was frozen indefinitely. It was then she realized that a formal decree wasn't necessary to weaken the foundation. All it took was making those who had once believed in it begin to hesitate. Throughout the afternoon, official notices from the palace's legal team kept pouring in. The demands targeted more than just a single slogan or logo. They encompassed almost every aspect of how the foundation presented itself to the world. The logo had to be reconsidered. The organization's introduction had to strip away any language that might imply royal endorsement. Funding proposals had to clarify that Buckingham Palace was not involved. Media materials could not use the Sussex title to lend credibility to the project. Meghan had imagined that if the palace were to take action, it would be a massive public and unmistakable confrontation. But what was happening was far more insidious. There was no single devastating blow that destroyed everything, only a series of requests for revisions and partners quietly stepping back. Her initial anger gradually gave way to panic. The moment that hurt Meghan the most came from a partner who had been with the foundation since its inception. That person cautiously asked whether the palace might continue to interfere with future campaigns. That question struck at Meghan's deepest fear. The foundation had been built as a testament to their independence, yet now outsiders viewed it as an organization that still required the royal family's permission to exist. Harry reacted in a completely different way. He stood up, paced the room, and began listing the lawyers, media advisors, and public figures he wanted to contact. Harry believed that if they responded swiftly and forcefully enough, the palace would be forced to back down under the pressure. But Meghan was no longer certain. She understood that a public battle could transform a legal dispute into a global confrontation between them and the royal family. In such a scenario, every statement, document, and partnership could be subjected to public scrutiny. That concern was quickly confirmed by their legal team. They warned that if Harry and Meghan sued to challenge the decree, the proceedings could force the disclosure of a vast array of internal documents, correspondence with donors, branding strategies, notes regarding the Sussex title, secret negotiations, and even past warnings issued by the palace. A court victory might help them protect the name, but that very battle could also destroy the reputation, privacy, and trust the foundation was striving to preserve. Meghan opened the file for their largest campaign. She took out the speech prepared for the launch, reread the opening lines, and then slowly tore the first page in two. The room fell silent. Harry gazed at the scraps of paper in his wife's hands. His anger had not yet vanished, but his next question was no longer directed at William Charles or the palace. He asked whether the Sussex Foundation could survive if its royal identity were no longer at its core. And for the first time since the rift began, their goal was no longer to defeat the palace. The objective had become something far more painful, determining what had to be sacrificed to save what could still be salvaged. And it was that very question that shifted the atmosphere in the room. After hours dominated by phone calls, legal documents, and a barrage of reactions from the outside world, the noise finally subsided. The lawyers departed. The advisors closed the door. Left on the table were only a sealed dossier, marked up plans, and the opening page of a speech Meghan had torn in two. No William to confront. No Charles to reproach. No lawyers to translate emotions into legal clauses. Only Harry and Meghan sitting across from each other, facing the question they had both tried to avoid since the crisis began. What did the foundation truly mean to them? Meghan was the first to break the silence. She admitted that the Sussex Foundation had long since ceased to be merely a charity. It had become proof that leaving the palace did not diminish her stature. Each successful campaign, each international partnership, and each major stage reinforced her belief that her influence did not depend on royal approval. Yet for that very reason, every warning from the palace felt like a personal rejection. When lawyers demanded changes to the logo, Meghan saw more than just a branding issue. She saw an institution still trying to dictate her worth. When partners asked about Buckingham Palace's interference, she heard more than legal concerns. She heard a question about whether what she was building truly belonged to her. Harry listened for a long time before voicing something he had never explicitly acknowledged. He defended the Sussex name for reasons that went beyond the foundation's strategic interests. That name was the last remnant of his royal life that he could still carry with him. Harry had stepped away from official duties, left the rooms, where he had grown up, and was living thousands of miles away from his family. Yet the title Sussex still gave him the feeling that a part of himself hadn't entirely severed ties with his old world. For Harry, relinquishing the power of that name meant far more than simply altering how an organization operated. It was akin to acknowledging that the royal life he had once assumed would always be his had truly come to an end. After that admission, Meghan rose and walked over to a low cabinet in the corner of the room. She retrieved an old file that hadn't been opened in years. Inside were notes she had written herself, following a private audience with Elizabeth at Windsor. Meghan reread each of the Queen's questions. Who would control the foundation if royal duties ceased? Who would be held accountable if a campaign proved controversial? How would the public know what had the Crown's approval? And what would happen if the title remained, yet the obligations attached to it were abandoned? Years earlier, Meghan had viewed those questions as evidence of coldness and mistrust. But now, amidst halted campaigns and partners stepping back, they sounded like the warnings of a monarch who saw exactly where the boundaries might dissolve. Harry took the notes and read them twice. His anger hadn't entirely vanished, yet for the first time he began to view the decree in a different light. Perhaps Elizabeth hadn't written it to punish them. Perhaps she simply believed the monarchy could not survive if titles continued to confer power while responsibilities were cast aside. After a long silence, Harry proposed a compromise that no lawyer had ever suggested. They would accept the restrictions. They would strip away any symbols or language that led the public to believe the foundation enjoyed the Crown's patronage. They would retain their philanthropic mission, but allow the organization to build its own reputation through results, rather than continuing to rely on an inherited identity. Meghan glanced down at the plan, which bore the Sussex emblem in the top corner. She held it for a moment longer, as if reflecting on the path she had once envisioned as her future. Then she set the document aside. So we'll build something they can't mistake for their own. The decision was made behind closed doors without victors or applause. Yet before Harry and Meghan could announce it in their own words, a morning headline transformed that private choice into a global judgment on titles, loyalty, and legacy. And by the next morning, Harry and Meghan's worst fears had come to pass. A major newspaper splashed a photo of Meghan across its front page with the headline, "The Queen's Final Line." Within hours, a complex legal restructuring had morphed into a global trial in the court of public opinion. Television programs debated power and titles. Commentators questioned loyalty, punishment, personal freedom, and duty to the crown. One segment of the public believed Meghan was being targeted because she and Harry had managed to retain their influence after leaving the royal family. To them, Elizabeth's decree was not merely about protecting the institution. It gave the palace the power to keep controlling a woman who had chosen her own path. Yet others saw it quite differently. They argued that such a line should have been drawn the very day Harry and Meghan stepped down from their working royal roles. From this perspective, one could not abandon the responsibility of representing the crown while continuing to leverage the weight of a royal title as a form of validation. Meghan sat before her screen, watching years of philanthropic work reduced to a dispute over branding. The campaign's communities and people the foundation had supported all but vanished from the narrative. Instead, the world saw only a confrontation between Meghan and Queen Elizabeth's legal legacy. That oversimplification pained her more than the agreement itself. In London, Charles also quietly read the media roundup. The king felt relieved that the institutional issue had finally been resolved without a court battle. Yet that relief was tinged with deep sadness. His mother's name had once again become the focal point of a conflict with Harry. Charles had upheld the principle Elizabeth had left behind. Yet he understood that his son might remember this decision not as the act of a king, but as the moment his father chose the crown once again. William did not view this as a victory either. He had achieved what he deemed necessary, a clear demarcation between private enterprise and royal authority. But the price of that clarity was a familial rift that was becoming increasingly difficult to bridge. There were no celebrations. There were no declarations of victory. There was only a principle upheld and relationships that remained scarred. Before noon, Buckingham Palace issued an official statement. The Sussex Foundation would not be shut down. Harry and Meghan had agreed to restructure their future campaigns, funding profiles, partnerships, and communications. The organization would have to ensure that no materials created the impression of royal patronage, palace oversight, royal involvement, or official endorsement by the monarch. The statement was drafted in carefully measured language, but its meaning was clear. Harry and Meghan could continue their mission. However, the organization would have to stand on its own merits. After the announcement was released, Charles sent a private letter to Harry and Meghan. He did not pretend that the agreement had healed the family rift. Nor did he ask them to thank the palace for sparing the foundation. Charles simply wrote that accepting this boundary had prevented the dispute from destroying any possibility of future reconciliation. It was not an apology, but neither was it a final rejection. Meghan read the letter once, then placed it beside the restructuring agreement. On the final page was a blank space where the Sussex emblem had once appeared in earlier plans. She paused at that empty space. Then Meghan signed. She put down her pen and said that from this moment on, the foundation would stand or fall based on what it actually achieved rather than on the public perception that the palace stood behind it. Harry did not reply immediately. He understood that they had preserved their mission, but had to relinquish some of the symbolic power of their former life. The Sussex name remained, but it could no longer serve as an ambiguous bridge between personal independence and royal authority. Meghan retains her ability to exert influence. However, she must now prove that this influence no longer relies on inherited prestige. Charles succeeded in safeguarding the monarchy, yet the rift with his youngest son has deepened. William upheld institutional boundaries, but he cannot view his brother's hurt as a victory. Ultimately, the decree left by Queen Elizabeth did not erase Harry and Meghan's work. It simply compelled them to choose full independence rather than leaving the institution while still relying on its power. Queen Elizabeth did not shut the door on Meghan's mission. She merely blocked the direct path from title to power. For a name can open the world's grandest doors, but only true purpose can keep them open for the long haul. Perhaps the greatest lesson here is that while a title may open many doors, only responsibility and genuine substance keep them wide open. In the end, there are no true winners, as every decision comes at a cost. What do you think was Queen Elizabeth's decree? A necessary measure to protect the monarchy? Or was it an overly harsh boundary for Harry and Meghan? Please share your views in the comments section below. And if you wish to continue exploring royal stories filled with secrets, conflict, and difficult choices, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and join us for the next story.